This is Wheelbearings. I'm Dan Roth.
And I'm Sam Abu Samad.
So welcome to episode 73. It's hot and steamy here, not as hot and steamy there, and we've got a lot of stuff to get through, so let's go.
Let's do it.
What have you been driving?
I spent the last week with the new Ford Expedition, which is the cheap version of the Lincoln Navigator, relatively speaking.
Was it all blue?
It was not all blue. It was sort of a brownish gold color. Quite attractive, actually, especially in the evening sunlight. The sunset gave it a really gold hue to it. And this was actually the Expedition Max, which is the supersized version of the Expedition, which I think has a wheelbase of something like 130 inches, which is almost as long as the EcoSport I was driving last week from bumper to bumper.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think that cars used to be that size. Like, I mean, big cars like Packards and stuff, but like the 130-inch wheelbases.
But the funny thing is, the old cars were big like that, but they had really small cabins, so you'd have like 6 feet of trunk and 8 feet of hood, and then a little cabin in the middle. So they were actually not really all that roomy inside. That's
true. Yeah. So, I mean, this definitely not that way. The Expedition is big, especially the extra long one.
Yeah. So this is the long wheelbase. So, just like the Navigator, they have it in 2 wheelbase lengths, a shorter and a long wheelbase. And it's a 3-row. And unlike the GM full-size SUVs, at least the current generation of the GM full-size utilities, for the last decade, Ford has had independent rear suspensions on the Expedition and Navigator, which means that they have a much lower floor in the back for the third row. So they're actually usable for adults. Like I'm 5'11", and I can sit fairly comfortably in the third row of the Navigator. Or of the Expedition, the Navigator too. But
either or.
Yeah, I mean, mechanically they're the same vehicle, but when you put them side by side, they don't look alike. And when you sit in them, there's no parts, none of the visible parts, nothing that you touch or see is common between the two. So it's all the switchgear and everything is unique. The hardware that it's controlling, the stuff that you don't see is the same, but all the switchgear is unique to each one. So they look more distinct than they ever have in the past, which is a good thing. When you're paying, an extra $20,000 for the Lincoln, you want to know you're getting something for your money. In this case, this was a Navigator or an Expedition. I keep getting
doing it, huh?
The Expedition Max Platinum Edition, 4-wheel drive. Base price is $78,500. As equipped, the one I had was $81,600, which seems like a lot of money, and it is. But I think when I had the Navigator, it was the standard length Navigator, and that thing was about $100,000. So it was about $20,000 more.
Yeah, but that's still that's Lincoln money. Like that, I mean that's big cash for an Expedition. Even though, I'm sure it's luxurious and nice and capable and all of those things, but that's the highest I've ever heard one of the Expedition being priced at.
It is, but you know what? They're selling more of them than they ever have.
Well, and they're better than they've ever been. I mean, that's true, but
and this one has some of the features that you'll find in the Lincoln. So you've got. I can't remember. Does the panoramic moonroof in the Lincoln extend back over the third seat as well, or just over the first 2 rows?
I think it's just over the first 2 rows.
Okay. So this one's got the same thing. It's got that panoramic moonroof. In the back, it's got power. There's switches in the rear of the cargo compartment on the side, so that if you're loading stuff in the back and you want to drop the seats down, you don't have to walk around to the side to drop the second row seats. You can just press the button and the second row seats flip down automatically. And you can do one side or the other independently. So if you've got something long you want to put down one side, you can do that, and you can motor the third row seats down as well. So you have this nice long flat cargo area. They've got their cargo management system in there, which is basically sort of a little reconfigurable shelf, in the back of the cargo area, so you can just have it flat, extend all the way a flat surface from the bumper all the way to the back of the front seats. Or if you've got people in the seating positions and you want to have, things at different level, stack things up in the cargo area, you can pop up this little shelf and have things below and things above, so there's all kinds of reconfigurability to this thing. The Platinum I had has the second row captain's chairs. So there's a pass through, a walk through, so there's only 2 seats in the second row. So you can only carry a mere 7 people in this one. But you can also get it with a bench seat in the second row. You don't get things like the really fancy, like controls of all the infotainment system that you get in the Lincoln for the second row and all that stuff. But there's USB ports and power everywhere at all the seating positions, or at least all the exterior seating positions. Plenty of leg room, plenty of headroom. And this thing can tow and haul pretty much as you need to. If you need anything, I think it's up to about 10,000 pounds that you can tow with this thing with the EcoBoost engine that's in here. And, it can basically go, just about anywhere you can fit it.
That was my, and I'm driving a Navigator again this week, so we'll get to that. But my take on it is that actually stripping away a bunch of the Lincoln stuff might actually make it, more straightforward to use, I suppose, in a way, or just I might have enjoyed it more trying the Expedition versus the Navigator, which is definitely teched up and has a lot of features, but those sometimes can get in the way of just sort of driving and operating the vehicle. So I can see the sort of the case for the Ford at 80 something thousand versus the Lincoln at 100.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the amenities that you get in here are actually you get a lot of the same stuff you get in the Lincoln. Like I said, like those remote folding seats that I mentioned.
Yeah.
It's got the Sync 3 system in there, which is basically the same system you get in the Lincoln, but just, skinned a little bit, different color, different color theme on the interface, but it's essentially the same interface. Instead of the, kind of piano key switches for the shifter, you get the rotary control knob like you have in the new Fusion and some of the other current Fords. So it's, in some respects it's slightly simplified. There's not as much of the really rich wood trim in there, but you have leather everywhere, and the wood trim that is in there on the center console, I actually personally prefer, because it's an open grain wood, instead of the really high gloss wood. So it, to my taste, I prefer that look, so it's more of a matte finish as opposed to the, something that looks like there's a layer of glass on top of the wood veneer.
Yeah.
And so that's that's a matter of personal preference. I think on the Lincoln, there's some options where you can get a similar type of wood finish. But so it doesn't look quite as luxurious as the Lincoln, but functionally it's about the same.
Yeah. And that's where the charm of the Expedition lies. It's got a powerful engine. It can do a lot of stuff. It's a heavy duty vehicle, and it really fills that role quite well. So, what were you getting fuel economy wise?
Not much. Yeah. It was about 18 miles per gallon.
Oh, that's not bad.
Yeah, it was like between 17 and 18, and it was mostly around town driving. I didn't take any longer trips with the Expedition this week. I didn't really go anywhere. We had the 4th of July in the middle of this week, and, we just went out to the lake a couple of times. So I didn't go any longer distances and didn't have any meetings to go to. So, I think, with highway driving, I saw a friend of mine who has an Expedition who's just getting ready for a road trip this weekend with his family, saying he's been getting 22, on the highway. So, I think that's, if you baby it, it's not bad. You can manage that.
That sounds really high. For that combo.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, the towing capacity on the Navigator or on the Expedition is 9,300 pounds, 104 cubic feet of cargo space behind the front row, which is pretty much big enough, I think, to swallow up an EcoSport.
Yeah, I mean, that's an entire, let's see, 100 cubic feet. That's an entire Accord interior.
Yeah. For reference, a Tesla Model S, which is by many people considered a large car, and technically the way the regulations are, it's classified as a large car, has 94 cubic feet of passenger space. This has 104 cubic feet of cargo space when you fold the second and third row seats down. And then you still have space for a couple of passengers up front.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the thing, too. There's always that, commentariat pointing out how ridiculous these big SUVs are. And yeah, if you're going to use it the same way as you would like a Prius C, I agree. It's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, it makes no sense. But if you have to tow a trailer and you've got, 5 or 6 kids, or you regularly carry large groups of people, then a vehicle like this makes sense, and, if you start looking at it from, in terms of the utility, if you're actually using the capabilities it has, it makes perfect sense. If you're driving it around solo as the only person in this vehicle or just one other person, it's ridiculous to drive a vehicle like this.
Other than the fact that you feel like you can crush things.
True. But one of the things that the Expedition has, and the Navigator has it as well. There's some really neat features that they put into these new utilities, like the Pro Trailer Backup Assist. I don't know if you've ever had a chance to sample that, but it's actually really cool. I didn't use it this week, but I did try it out last summer at a demo that Ford was doing. And when you're using, if you're towing a trailer, one of the, especially if you've got a boat, if you've got to back up with the trailer hooked up, it can be really nerve wracking if you're not used to it. Yeah. And, so they have this Pro Trailer Backup Assist system, and you can set it up for, I think, up to about 4 or 5 different trailers, so if for whatever reason you have multiple different trailers that you tow at various times, you can have multiple settings in there for each one. But basically, when you set it up, it uses the rear backup camera to see, you put a grid sticker on the trailer itself, and you calibrate it with the backup camera. So then it can measure the angle of the trailer, and then it basically there's a knob on the dashboard that you put it in reverse, engage the Pro Trailer Backup Assist, and then you can basically steer it with this knob, to where you want to go, and it will actually handle the steering. The system actually takes control of the steering actuator. So you just twist the knob to where you want to go, and then the system takes care of the rest. And so if you need to back up, down a boat ramp to put your boat in the water or things like that, it makes it so much easier to do. And it's also a lot safer than, especially if you're inexperienced. If you do it all the time, you get used to it and you know how to maneuver a trailer. But if it's something you only do a couple of times a year, in the spring or the fall when you're loading your boat into the lake or taking it out, then it can be a pretty harrowing experience. So features like that make it a lot easier. Granted, not a lot of people, need to do that on a regular basis.
Well, that's the thing, though. It's because you don't need to do it on a regular basis, and it's really not that big of a cost for them to add that feature, and they can put it into some kind of tech package, because Ford does that. It's like, the rapid spec package is generally how they equip the cars. it's bundled with a bunch of other stuff that people do want. So it's there when you need it. And it's,
and the hardware is all there for other features anyway. Things like, you've got for the active park assist and the lane keeping system, you've got, your steering control, you've got the various sensors, and the backup camera are all there on the vehicle anyway. So it's a matter of adding some extra software, and the only additional piece of hardware is just the control knob on the dashboard.
Yeah, which I kept hitting as the start
when you were trying
button.
to shift.
No, just to start it. Because it's in the exact spot that you'd expect the push button to be for starting and stopping. At least on the Navigator.
It is on the Expedition too. It's to the lower left of the touchscreen.
Yeah, and so there's still some of that like Ford ergonomic weirdness around both of these, and I don't know that that's ever going to really be solved. I think it's just they put stuff where they had space for it, or the trailer knob control team got in a cage match with the start push button team, and they all had to duke it out for real estate.
And this is one of the reasons why some manufacturers have gone to more touch interfaces, so that you don't, because with all these different features on there, trying to find a place for all the physical controls is a problem. But conversely, as people have tried to use the touch interfaces or other interfaces, they've found that they hate them. So they're kind of going back and forth, and they're trying to find the right balance between the two.
Yeah, they've definitely got the balance more right than wrong. So
yeah.
At
least it's got rotary volume and tuning knobs.
That is true.
And also for the climate control.
For the climate too. That's nice. I think the Navigator did. I can't remember. I'm not in it at the moment. So it's just, they all, after a certain point, they all blend together. And I wound up putting miles on the Crown Victoria today. So I went old school.
Oh,
I love
that is old school.
Just the groan. It had gas in it. I didn't want to fill up the Navigator. But yeah, so I think we went over kind of the last time I had the Navigator, my main thoughts with it, which sort of mirror your thoughts about the Expedition. Just add a layer of glitz. This time around, it's not the all blue one. It's this one it's a tan, gold, brown kind of exterior color, and just a much sort of more normal tan interior with like darker piping, and it's lovely. Ford really did it. I don't know that I fully appreciated it with the blue interior because it was so unnatural, but they did a really good job on materials and fit and finish, and the inside of the Navigators is quite nice.
Oh yeah, it is. And I'm just looking at my photos of the Navigator interior, and for the climate controls on the Navigator, instead of the rotary knobs, they have the rocker switches. So
it's
that's
right. They're blue and red. Yeah.
Yeah. So where the Ford has the touchscreen embedded in the dashboard, and then it's got the audio controls directly below that, and then the climate controls below that with rotary knobs, all in this vertical stack. The Expedition the Navigator, the Lincoln has the stand-up display on top of the dash, the tablet style display, and then there's an angled panel below the transmission switches, and that's where you have the climate controls and the volume and tuning knobs. And for the temperature control, you've got a pair of rocker switches that you can flip up or down to go hotter or cooler, instead of a rotary knob that you twist. So it's still a physical control, which is a good thing. It's just a little bit different, to distinguish it, from and to make it unique from the Ford.
It sounds like I would probably like the Ford better for its ergonomic layout. But yeah, I think among big SUVs, this pair, the Expedition and the Navigator, are really well done. Probably better than just about. Its most direct competitor, obviously, is the Tahoe and the Suburban. And the
Escalade,
right, and the Escalade. But there's also
and those are going to be all new next year. So next year is when things are going to get interesting from a competitive perspective, because you're going to have new GM utilities, and then FCA is also going to probably bring something out as well. They're going to have some large utilities added to their lineup. Yeah,
and don't forget the ones like the Armada and the QX80, and I guess there's still the Sequoia, but that's not really a play.
Yeah, the Sequoia is by far and away the oldest of the bunch now, and
true to its name.
Yeah, exactly. Presumably, at some point, Toyota will revamp the Tundra and bring a new Sequoia as well. The Armada and the QX80 from Nissan, those, I think certainly, you have a lot of the luxury. They're not quite as gargantuan, though, as the Lincolns, the Ford and Lincoln and the GM utilities. I think they're quite a bit shorter. So they still have 3 rows of seating, but they don't stretch half the length of a football field, it seems like.
Yeah, that's true. I guess this is still a segment where there's money to be made. So,
and a lot of it.
Yeah. A lot of margin.
Even if you're only selling, 60 or 70,000 of these a year, there's a huge profit margin on these, which is why they keep building them.
Yeah, because underneath it all, it's really just an F series.
Yep. Mostly.
So the other thing I had, last week before the new Navigator was a Mazda CX-9. So I think what's going on is, do you remember, this is a couple of shows ago now, you had the Outlander, and we talked about how it's sort of got something unique with its 3 rows and that sort of size. I think what's going on is the universe is saying, well, actually, Dan, because since then I've had the Sorento, and the CX-9, which are both a little bit larger than that Outlander, but they also both sort of pack a surprise 3rd row that you don't always necessarily think of when you think of that particular size class of vehicle. So, I've gotten to try out I think everything but the Outlander recently, and the Mazda CX-9 is, it's pretty nice to drive. I'm not sure it's the most competitive vehicle in its segment. I think you give up a little bit of cargo space and overall just value for the that size class. There's the Sorento, for example, had a V6. Mm-hmm. The CX-9 does not.
Right, it's got a turbo 4,
which feels pretty lively, but it also, when you really call up for full steam ahead, it feels a little bit taxed. So it's like, oh, that's all there is. But
it does have a really nice interior.
It does.
And the exterior styling is really sharp.
It's
a
beautiful.
Good-looking vehicle.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's easy to operate. It surprised me because it has more body roll than you'd think it might have, but that actually helps you enjoy driving it, because I guess it's a driver car symbiosis thing. I'm sure there's a word for it that Mazda has too, some Japanese word. But you can go into a turn without really overdoing it, and you'll get some of that feeling like, hey, I'm really driving here. Mm-hmm. And it's a good chassis. It's pretty stiff, and you get feedback through the wheel and the controls. It's set up well, even though it is a 3-row crossover. It still feels pretty good to drive, except for that power deficit thing.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, honestly, the 4-cylinder, it's fine pretty much all the time. It's just,
I think most people will not really, take issue with the performance of it. And at some point, I wouldn't be surprised if, at some point in the next couple of years, we see a variation of it, that perhaps has a mild hybrid system on it, to give it a little more torque boost.
Yeah.
Yep. If you threw a 48-volt mild hybrid on there, that would give it, some torque boost for those times, when you want to do a merge onto a highway and you need that little bit of extra oomph, just to get you up to 75. And that'll help you for those short bursts, and then when you're when you're cruising along, you don't really need it.
Yeah, that's a really viable way to do it these days instead of carting around a big engine all the time. I think that's as we continue to see the need for fuel economy, especially if the price of fuel spikes even higher. There's going to still be that desire for these vehicles, but also, the performance. So it's a balancing like the performance, the demand, and the actual efficiency. And so, I think we're at a point now where we weren't 10 years ago, where, it's easier to add mild hybrid systems and, even more traditional hybrid, more complex hybrids to a lot of different vehicles and really get us that performance and economy, fuel efficiency that we're going to need. So,
and actually Mazda will be bringing some strong hybrids to market too. I don't know if they'll put one in the CX-9, but they may well, because they're working with Toyota. They've got their partnership with Toyota. Toyota took a 15 or 20% stake in Mazda, and Mazda owns a few percent of Toyota's stock. So they're partnering on a lot of future powertrain stuff, among other things. And so we may well see the Toyota hybrid system land in vehicles like the CX-9 in the next few years. Yeah.
And I don't see how that could be a bad thing.
Yeah. I mean, well, you've driven the Highlander hybrid, right?
Yeah, probably. I haven't been in a Highlander in a while.
Or, I mean, certainly the Camry, it's the same basic system. They just scale it up or down a little bit for each vehicle.
The Camry, the last Camry hybrid I drove was excellent.
Yeah, so that's a really good system. So, if you were to add that with, Mazda's driving dynamics, I think it would be a really good combination.
I can't complain about that. The only real complaints I had was just sort of getting in and out of the third row was a little tough in the CX-9, just because it's not all that big, and the second row seats don't really kind of get out of the way.
And that's really a problem with all of these kind of upper mid-size utilities. The third row is really very much more of an occasional thing. If you really need a third row all the time, you need to go to one of the bigger utilities, like a Tahoe, or not necessarily a Tahoe, but like a Chevy Traverse or an Explorer or one of those
or
vehicles.
A van. Yeah.
Or a van. Yeah.
And the other wrinkle I think, and this is just us being guys who spend a week in a car versus somebody who owns it, is the Mazda sort of infotainment interface. You get used to it, but it felt like a little bit clunky. And I don't know why, because generally in the past I've liked it. So that's probably just a fluke.
Yeah, I mean, the current interface they've had in their cars for several years now, I think it's better than a lot of them. It can be a little slow sometimes, but I think next year or maybe later this year, they're going to be adding CarPlay and Android Auto support to that as well. And I'm not sure if that's going to be available as a software update on some of the current cars. I think some of the 2018 and 2019 models will have it. We'll be able to get a software update. Some of the older ones will not.
Well, yeah. And so you're just going to have to trade it in and get a new one.
That's right. Support the economy. Buy. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, like 3-row crossovers. I mean, who knew that there was such a variety? And it definitely feels sporty to drive. So that's nice that Mazda thing is still in like everything they make. One thing I noticed on both the CX-9 and the Navigator, which seemed weird to me, was like, do you ever just like open the door and look at the quality of like paint and finish around that area that's generally covered by the doors, just like the door jambs and stuff? Mm-hmm. It seems like, especially the Lincoln, I was like, it almost looks like they decided to make that a Class A surface. It's just like super smooth and perfect.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they did in fact do that.
Really,
especially on the Lincoln, because they're trying. Lincoln, has really been trying to hit all those details. They're trying to make for their customers, they don't want them to notice any little flaws. They want to get everything as perfect as they can within reason.
Huh.
So it wouldn't surprise me if they did in fact do that.
Well, it's noticeable. It's like noticeably great finish inside. I was like, wow, that looks really, really good. It's as good as the outside finish, which is good. It's a good looking vehicle on the outside, and it's well sort of put together, at least brand new off the showroom floor as we see them. I guess the Navigator kind of won me over the second time around. I like it better than I did. So I came to terms with the seats and So
with those 30-way power adjustable seats, you found a position that works for you?
Yeah, I got more comfortable this time than the last time. So
okay.
Yeah. All right, let's get into some stuff because we have the few things to talk about. We'll just start at the top of the list because it's A, and that's alphabetical. Okay. So Audi e-Tron has has virtual side mirrors, I guess they're called.
Yeah. So the e-Tron Quattro is Audi's first pure battery electric vehicle that's coming out. It's going to go on sale this fall. I guess they're going to do the official global debut in September in San Francisco. It was originally scheduled to happen in Europe, but apparently with their current or most recent CEO currently sitting in a German jail cell, they decided to move it to the U.S. Which actually, all things considered, is probably a wise decision from a marketing standpoint anyway, because California is going to be a prime market for this thing. So this is a crossover. I guess from what I understand, it's kind of sized kind of midway in between a Q5 and a Q7. So sort of a mid-size, upper mid-size crossover. It's probably similar in size to the CX-9. And it's battery electric, and it's on a new electric platform, which it's actually, believe this is, this may or may not be the same platform that they're using for the Porsche Taycan, whatever the hell, however you pronounce that.
Taycan.
Yeah, but it's going to have a 95 kilowatt hour battery pack, all-wheel drive, dual motor all-wheel drive, just like a certain other luxury electric crossover that you can get. And one of the they've been teasing out over the last few months a variety of the features that are going to be on this thing, and one of those features is not Falcon Wing doors, but something that would actually have an actual useful benefit, which is these virtual side mirrors or camera mirrors. One of the when you're trying to reduce the aerodynamic drag of a vehicle, one of the big issues is those big mirrors you got hanging off the side of the body. They can produce a fair amount of drag and wind noise, and manufacturers have been working on for years. They've had concept cars that used cameras on the side to act as mirrors, but now the e-Tron will be the first production model that actually offers this, at least as an option in markets where it's legal, which is one of the issues right now in the U.S. These things are not legal, but hopefully can get NHTSA to change those rules to allow them to be legal, because it has a significant benefit both aerodynamically but also functionally.
Yeah, I mean, I get the idea of the benefits. I just hate more screens, man. I'm thinking about the Honda, lane watch or whatever the hell it was called, where you tap the blinker and it would flip this video screen on and distract you. And I don't know. I'm not sure that I see the same thing in a video screen that I do in just a prismatic mirror. So.
Well, in this case, the lane watch, the lane watch system, you had the camera mounted on the passenger side mirror. And when you turn on the right turn signal, it would switch the center display over to displaying the view from that camera, which means, it was changing modes, and, you're right, it was kind of a distraction. In this case, with the Audi and with some other prototypes I've seen from other companies, last year I saw a prototype vehicle that Magna was showing with their system, and I'm not sure if Magna is the supplier for Audi on this one or not, but what they've done is they've embedded a pair of smaller displays on the door panels, so on the ends of the IP, close to where the view where your outside mirrors would normally be. And so these things will be on all the time. So effectively what you're doing is you're moving the mirrors from the outside of the car to the inside. So it's not like I don't think it's any more of a distraction than having a mirror that would be there. It's just there, when you glance over, just as you glance over at your mirror, and when you hopefully you glance over at your mirror when you're making lane changes.
Oh, is that what you're supposed to do?
Well, sometimes that happens.
I mean, I don't know, with an Audi, I think you just go and people just get out of your way because you have an Audi.
Well, okay. Well, there is that. So in theory, at least, you're supposed to glance over at your mirrors, and then glance over your shoulder to check blind spots before you switch lanes. And, these are, going to be close to the same position as where your mirrors would be, just slightly more inboard. So it's like looking at your mirror, and it's just got that view there all the time. I think one of the big advantages, besides the aerodynamics from a safety perspective, a lot of people don't set up their mirrors properly. They don't have them positioned to give them the best possible view of what's outside. And, depending on where your seating position is, if you're, depending on how tall you are, if you're moving your seat up or down or forward or back, you have to position the mirrors. You have to set the mirrors to give you the right view outside. With a camera system, the cameras are always in the right position. They're set from the factory to give you the optimal view. So you should always have the right view no matter what your seating position is, because you're just looking at the screen and getting that view from the camera. And I think that's a much safer solution, I think, for most people.
How do they propose it's going to work at night? Is it going to be another backlit screen to mess with your night vision?
That's a good question. I don't know. I really don't know. It probably will be, yes.
Great. Can hardly wait for our... the car's driving itself, right?
I suspect that they will dim it. So it'll probably be, like your phone, there'll probably be an ambient light detector so that at night, it reduces the illumination. So it's not nearly as bright, and then in the daytime, in bright sunlight, it'll crank up the brightness of the screens so that, you can always see what's there. At least I hope so. I hope that's the case.
I mean, I'd be interested to try it out. I may, I do think that it's useful to show, because you can get that wider angle of view with a camera lens than you can with a mirror. You can only do so much even with concave or convex mirrors. Mm-hmm. That can be helpful. You can help people see into the blind spot that way. So,
well, and especially on a lot of cars, on cars, especially a lot of times, not so much on utilities and trucks, where they tend to use larger mirror housings, but on a lot of cars like, the Mustang that I just got delivered today, the Mustang actually has very small mirrors.
So it's just out in front of everything though.
Well, there is that, but a lot of performance cars, for example, and a lot of smaller cars have very small mirrors, and so getting a good view, in those mirrors is challenging. So, I think if you have a virtual mirror system like this, I think that's definitely a benefit.
Yeah, look, we have to keep trying new.
Obviously, there's certain issues, like you said, with the nighttime illumination and things like that. But I think overall, it's a net positive. All right. We'll see. We'll see when we get a chance to try it. Hopefully, later this fall.
I do think by shrinking the housings, right there, that's probably a significant fuel economy benefit.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
and especially on a battery electric, where you want to reduce the drag as much as possible, you want to get rid of parasitic losses. Switching to that type of system, getting rid of those mirrors on the outside, that has a significant difference.
Yeah, and I guess I should stop calling it fuel economy when you're talking about a battery
energy efficiency.
Although it is, I mean, it's got to be fossil fuel.
Yeah. Not necessarily. It could be solar or it could be wind.
Can be fossil fuel, depending on where you charge it.
Yes.
The thoughts were coming out before the brain could peel them back. This is why I write. I don't talk. That's all right.
You have a chance to edit before you publish.
Yeah, that's okay. We'll just let that one go. So yeah.
Wait, do you edit?
Occasionally.
Yeah. Okay.
Next topic.
I wait for the emails to come in and correct me.
Yeah, because sometimes I just do that when you're like, I just got to get the post up. You put the post up and it's, ready, fire, aim.
Yeah.
So our next topic is tariffs and price increases, because that happened.
Yeah, so as we're recording this today on Friday, tariff the trade war is officially on, and tariffs have gone into effect on a whole bunch of products, and retaliatory tariffs, from China and for the Europeans and Canadians. So prices are going to be going up on a whole bunch of stuff, especially cars in the next few weeks and months. Unless this gets resolved fairly quickly, which I suspect it probably won't. So, if you're planning to buy a car that's got, actually pretty much any vehicle, car, truck, or utility, in the coming months, you'll probably be paying significantly more, and we'll probably see vehicle sales go down in the second half of 2018, and we'll probably start seeing some layoffs. And, BMW has said that they're going to be raising prices on their utilities, because right now their Spartanburg plant in South Carolina is their single largest plant in their entire system in the world.
Right.
And, they build all of the X3s, X4s, X5, X6s, and the upcoming X7 at the Spartanburg plant. And they export more than 100,000 of those a year from Spartanburg just to China. I think their total exports from Spartanburg are about 250,000, and 100,000 a year go just to China. And the prices on those are going to go up by 25% in China, because, part of the retaliatory tariffs from China was 25% on U.S. made vehicles. So in all likelihood, BMW will probably end up cutting production due to slowing sales and laying off some people from their Spartanburg, South Carolina plant.
So it's also, though, does BMW have the ability with other manufacturing locations to pull the products that they're making in Spartanburg, or some of them, and shift it to a plant?
Yeah, I mean, they could shift production, but that's something that's going to take some time, because right now the Spartanburg plant, they, except for the X1 and the X2, all of BMW's other utilities are built in Spartanburg for the global market, for Europe and South America and Africa and the Middle East. They all come from Spartanburg. So the X1 and X2 are the only ones that are made in Europe. And, so the other plants are not set up to build those vehicles. If this goes on for any length of time, I wouldn't be surprised to see BMW shift some of that production overseas, in order to avoid the tariffs. But, that's a process that's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah. So short-term pain. And I, like you, I don't know that the tariff and the situation and trade war thing are going to work out quick. Now, I may be wrong, because there is some of that idea that, the cultures are different, and taking a really hard line with in negotiations with other cultures actually tends to sometimes be a more effective tactic. I don't know how true that is. I guess we'll see.
In some cases, I think it probably is true. In the case of vehicles built in North America and exported to China, I think the Chinese would just as soon not see any of those vehicles be imported from the U.S. anyway. I think they would just as soon have those built locally. If anything does change, that's probably what will happen. Is we'll probably see some of that production shift to China, or at least back to Germany, but certainly to China. And have them produced locally for that market, because that's still a growing market, as opposed to North America, which is kind of flattened out in the past couple of years and is likely to stay that way over the next several years, or at least over the next decade. There, even before this, we weren't projecting a whole lot of volume growth in North America over the next 5 to 10 years. China, on the other hand, is still a growing market, and it would make sense if you're going to shift production anywhere. It would make sense to shift it to China.
Yeah. Well, also, I mean, America's the North American market's not growing, but it's also like it's been at 17 million cars for the last couple of years. Like that's
it's actually declined a little bit last year and the year before. From its peak 3 years ago of 17.4, 17.5, dropped to about 17 last year, and we'll probably be somewhere around there this year. So it's still a good market, but it's not a growing market. And for vehicles like those utilities, where there's even more growth in China than there is here. I would expect that we'll see some of that production shift over there if this goes on for any length of time. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I think the North American market, the only place it has to go right now is down, even if we didn't have a tariff situation. There's just a lot of other pressures, happening. And I mean, cars are an expensive thing. And I don't know that... I don't know that making them more expensive is going to help anybody.
No. But on the other hand, we're seeing, companies, trying to address the affordability issue in other ways, like obviously Waymo, with their autonomous vehicles, and GM. GM's preparing to launch their autonomous ride-hailing service probably sometime in the first half of next year. They've said they're going to do it in 2019. They haven't said where, but it will almost certainly, San Francisco will almost certainly be the first market, just because that's where they've been doing the bulk of their testing with their system, with their autonomous Chevy Bolt. And Bloomberg reported this week that they're starting to put the pieces in place over there. Apparently, they installed 18 DC fast chargers in a parking garage near the Embarcadero in San Francisco in recent weeks, and so those are for GM's Cruise fleet to operate in that area. It's a fairly heavily trafficked area in San Francisco, and that'll probably be one of the prime locations for this service to operate.
So this is basically GM doing what we had speculated was actually probably easy for them to do at some point. Anyways, just basically they're building their own Uber.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah, I mean they've been doing that for more than a year. For about a year now, they've been testing their own ride-hailing platform internally with Cruise and GM employees in San Francisco. So they have an app. I've seen when I was out there at the end of November to ride in their vehicle, I saw the app. I saw their back-end system running their dispatch system. The app is similar to what you would get from any other ride-hailing service. You open it up, you tap the button to show your location and put in where you want to go, and then a vehicle comes and picks you up and takes you to that location. It's just that instead of having a driver in there, it's just an automated Chevy Bolt, which may or may not have a steering wheel and pedals, depending on whether they get their waiver from NHTSA.
I still question though, like, how are they going to make it attractive enough that the switching cost from even like people know all about Uber and the issues and their there's even that fear factor sometimes with just weirdo Uber drivers versus, the corporate issues. How are they going to get past that switching cost? With all that, still people use Uber heavily.
The thing is, this is something I've been saying about ride-hailing services for a while, and what the potential problem that companies like Uber and Lyft have is that for the consumer, for the rider, there is no switching cost. When you're on a social network, if you're on Facebook and you want to switch to a different social network, it's of no value to you unless you can get all your friends to come along to that social network as well. So unless you get all your friends to go with you to Snapchat or to Google Plus or whatever else it might be, if your friends that you want to communicate with aren't also on that platform, it's of no value to you. So there's a huge switching cost there. But to go from Uber to Lyft, or from Lyft to whatever GM calls their service, or to Zoox or anybody else, you don't have to rely on anybody else to follow you along. As long as you've got the app there, you open up the app, tap where you are. If there's a vehicle available, you use it and you go. There is no switching cost for the consumer.
I guess the only cost really is just like the pain of setting up a new app and putting all your info into it. And
yeah, but that takes you 2 minutes.
No, I know. Some of us are that lazy, Sam.
you log in, put in your credit card number, you're done.
Yeah. What could possibly go wrong? Who could possibly steal it?
We do it every day.
I know.
Everybody's got our credit card numbers anyway. So,
that's true.
Our social security numbers and our age and address and everything else are already all over the dark web anyway. So, what's what's putting it into one more app?
Right. Yeah, that's true. And what? Have fun with the nothing that's in there. So,
yeah. This is the fundamental problem that the ride-hailing companies have, is that it is actually easy to switch for the consumers. The network effect for ride-hailing doesn't come from the consumers; it comes from the drivers, which is one of the reasons why they want to move to driverless systems. Because, for the companies, they rely on having a large network of drivers so that there's short wait times for the riders, and so that people will want to use the service. But, if you have a fleet of automated vehicles and you have enough vehicles, and the wait times are short enough, the switching cost to the consumer is nothing. And so I think that if the vehicles prove to be safe and it's priced right, then I think people will probably use it, especially in a place like San Francisco. In a place like San Francisco, I think the adoption is, people are more likely to adopt a new technology like that than, say, in Chicago or Detroit, or maybe even Boston.
Where are they going to put all the cars, though? It's not like they can even have them in a central place outside of San Francisco or within. They're going to have them sort of distributed around the city, and even driverless, it doesn't really solve the problem of easing gridlock. It just actually adds more cars.
Yeah, and this is why they've been working on the logistics back end, because both from addressing the congestion problem, but also just from a business standpoint. From a business standpoint, if you want to make money on a service like this, you've got to maximize the utilization of the vehicles. So the thing you don't want is deadheading miles. You don't want these cars cruising around town empty. So you need to have a system that optimizes the number of vehicles you've got out there, optimizes where they're located so that they're carrying passengers as much of the time as possible. And this is one of the things that, like, for example, Ford, you look at Ford and what they're doing. This is one of the reasons why they're not just focusing on ride hailing. They're looking at what are all the other things we can do with these vehicles so that we're constantly using them for something productive and making money off of them for every mile they drive. We don't want them just sitting around doing nothing. It's like the airline model where, when an airliner is sitting on the tarmac, it's just costing the airline money. But when it's in the air, flying and carrying passengers and cargo, that's when it's making money. And you need to do the same thing with these autonomous vehicles. So that's why you see, like, for example, Uber investing in things like Uber Eats and, package delivery and other things, because they want to be able to utilize the vehicles to the maximum amount possible and get as much revenue out of it for every hour of the day. And this is why, I think, what we're seeing right now from GM with the autonomous bolts is only the first step. I think that this, the use of the bolt as the vehicle for this initial platform is only an interim thing. I think what we're going to see probably within the next 2 years is they'll transition away from using the bolt to a vehicle that's been specifically designed for this, that's got flexibility to do different things and can easily switch from carrying packages to carrying people to delivering food or whatever else it might be.
Yeah, and like there are benefits to certain groups of the population, right, who just they don't have access to mobility. The elderly, the disabled, people who just can't afford a car or whatever. So like, I do see the benefit. I just we are rushing to solve some problems, and yet some of the other major problems are. It's almost like we're collectively kind of ignoring them to a degree. And
well, that is what we do, isn't it?
Yeah.
In this country.
Yeah, of course.
But no, you're right. I mean, it's a lot more to really address the problems. It's going to be a lot more complicated than just putting autonomous ride-hailing cars on the road. Like I said, you need to optimize the use of those vehicles so they're not sitting around taking up space. You don't have empty vehicles driving around, but also, you need to coordinate them with transit services and, with a multimodal mobility system, so that you can get the cost down and still make it profitable. Because, the thing is, even right now, for us, to use, a ride hailing service or a taxi, the cost to us, we're middle class, we've got fairly decent income. We can afford it. But there's a lot of people, especially when you look at cities, this is, we're really, a lot of what we're trying to address is urban problems. And for a lot of the people that live in cities, the incomes are not enough to pay for using these kinds of services all the time. So it's got to be a lot more affordable than even an Uber or Lyft is today.
Yeah.
There was a thing that came out last week, I think from the Census Bureau, and in San Francisco now, if for a family of four with an income of less than $117,000, you're now considered low income.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
$117,000 a year is low income in San Francisco.
In San Francisco,
and there's
a
lot of people who make a fraction of that in San Francisco.
Yeah, but there's this, San Francisco has possibly the largest gulf between in income inequality, right? You've got all the tech.
Oh yeah,
tech
no,
folks.
Absolutely.
And you've got then the sort of long term. I don't want to call them true San Franciscans, but I mean, like San Francisco 20 years ago was not what it is now. Like it's
that's absolutely true. But the thing is, if you look at any big city, that's increasingly a problem.
Oh yeah, Boston's the same way. We're 40 miles outside of the city, 45 roughly. Prices here, like even for a house, right? Like a modest house is going to be $350,000, $400,000, like for a family home, like someplace nice, not too nice, but a couple thousand square feet, maybe a garage, whatever, like the average home, middle class sort of suburbs, whatever. You go 10 minutes east of here, and prices, that's a couple $100,000 more. Like you're in the 6s, 7s, 8s, and like in the ring around Route 95, rings Boston, there's stupid things like 1,300 square foot, 50-year-old houses for like $1 million that basically is just there for the land. And somebody buys it and they knock it down and they put something disgusting up. So like, that income inequality thing is getting really, really, it's stretched really thin. Like, I wonder what the breaking point is. And I was actually talking about the mobility thing with my wife and kids on the 4th, actually. Just how, like, if you don't have a car and you don't have enough income to own a car or whatever your circumstances are, it is a huge pain to get around. It takes a long time. It's expensive. It makes it harder for you to get to work on time. And so like you're stacking the deck against people who like can least afford the deck to be stacked, you know, like, yes, from us, there are two little cities here. We've got the city that we live in and then the next city over. There are about 45,000 people. So in this area, there's 100,000 people roughly. To go from one side of our city to the other side of the next city over on the bus, like I don't even know how you'd work that out. It would take you more than an hour to go.
Yeah, you know, and that's a problem in Detroit too. I mean, you know, Detroit, because it's so spread out, you know, it's such a geographically large city with a comparatively small population for its size, you know, for anybody to get to a job is a real problem. And this is one of the issues they're trying to deal with in Detroit, is how to make mobility affordable so that people can get to jobs and get to school and you know, wherever else they need to go. You know, I mean, at least in a place like San Francisco, it's fairly geographically compact, but it's still enormously expensive. And, you know, just going to automated mobility services is not going to solve the problem unless you also address a lot of these other surrounding issues of how you make it more affordable, you know, and make these businesses sustainable, you know, because, you know, I mean, you look today at the ride hailing services and they all lose a fortune. You know, the only reason they're as cheap as they are is because VCs, you know, that funded these things have been willing to sustain huge losses as they try to grow them.
Right. And that was my point. I was like, those like Uber and Lyft and whatever, like those rides are cheap and they're artificially cheap. And what's going to happen? Like, this is my concern.
And yet still a lot of people can't afford them.
Right. And well, especially too, if you're unbanked, you don't have a credit card. You may have a smartphone, but you know, like you've got like a track phone or something, right?
Yeah. You get a prepaid phone, you know,
right.
But that's not going to be enough.
So those artificially inexpensive rides, while those investors at a certain point are going to get frustrated and just say uncle, unless they can figure out how to make it affordable or not affordable, profitable. To me, that says like at a certain point, the prices are going to go up on stuff like Uber and Lyft.
Absolutely.
Right. So does that happen before or after, the sustainability of public infrastructure has been damaged to the point where either the compelling case to privatize it has been made? And is that the end goal? And that's to me, that's really chilling, because
I think for some of these companies that is in fact the goal. Although, you know, certainly I think at Lyft, at least, you know, one of the things been hearing from Lyft is that they do want to collaborate with, you know, with the local transit systems and with cities, you know, to try to make this more manageable. And this is, you know, again, you know, a number of companies, including Ford, you know, this is one of the things that Ford is doing. You know, one of the companies that they bought in the last year is a company called Autonomic, you know, that built this what they call a transportation operating system, you know, and it's a platform for cities to use to coordinate all these different services, you know, to try to get the right balance of mass transit and microtransit and, you know, individual ride hailing and all the other services to work together, you know, to get the optimum mix, you know, for a city, so that you can, you know, start to cut down on congestion, cut down on the need for parking, cut down, you know, and make it all more affordable and accessible to everyone, you know, including low income, but also the elderly and the young and you know, whoever can't drive for whatever reason. You know, so companies are looking at how to do this. They're trying to figure out the solutions. Nobody, you know, has figured out a way to do it yet and make money. You know, and that's why everybody's doing all kinds of different experiments, you know, and we're seeing, you know, even before we get automated vehicles, you know, that's why you're seeing these experiments with things like subscription services, you know, trying to figure out, you know, what is the price elasticity? How much are people going to be willing or afford to pay, you know, to get, you know, access, you know, at various kinds of levels to transportation?
Yeah, I still like, I would love to be able to take my bike. I'd love to have like a 2 mile
and
commute.
that's part of it too. I mean, things like bikes and scooters, trying to get all this stuff into the mix as well. I mean, you've got these dockless scooters now in a bunch of cities, and how do you manage that? Because these things need charging, and, the idea of being able to pick up a scooter and ride to where you need to go and just leave it, and not have to go searching for a dock somewhere is great until, all of a sudden, they're all stacked up on some street corner.
Seems like it's not playing
and none
out
of them
well.
are charged.
Yeah.
So, it's not nearly as simple as just going out and dropping off a bunch of scooters and, putting an app on the app store and say, here, have at it. Now these companies are paying people, the next, job category is just driving around, picking up scooters and charging them, I think, like Bird or Lime Scooter or somebody, they're paying people like $15 a pop to pick up the scooters and charge them and put them back in service again. And so, people are driving around, picking up a dozen scooters in the back of a van and going and charging them somewhere. And so, I mean, we have to figure out all these logistics, and it's not a trivial problem.
That's great. They're crowdsourcing their own fleet maintenance.
Yeah.
That's, oh, dear God.
But that's, as you get into automated vehicles, that's something that you're not going to be able to do. You're not going to be able to crowdsource stuff like that because those things require some very delicate maintenance, and making sure that the sensors are calibrated and everything. So that, there's a bunch of things that don't get talked about a lot that actually are going to add a lot of cost to the service. So even as you eliminate the cost of the drivers, there's a whole bunch of new costs associated with these services. And, so it's not, again, even if Uber were able to, replace all of their drivers with autonomous vehicles tomorrow, there's no guarantee that they're going to make money anytime soon.
Well, and with all of this too, it's not an either or solution. It's always going to be more of a yes and kind
it's
of
a
thing.
mix of a whole bunch of things.
So yeah, all right. Wow, we went a little deeper on that than I thought we would. All right, where do we want to go next?
All right, so Nissan and Daimler canceled their plans to build a luxury compact car
I thought
together.
they like that. So that's not the one they're already building together now.
No. So currently they have the QX60 or the QX30 and the GLA. Infiniti QX30 and the Mercedes GLA are on the same platform. The Infiniti is just a rebodied GLA. So there's that. And then they've got some joint ventures, where they're doing some engines together. I think Infiniti is building some engines for Mercedes, and they're using some Mercedes diesel engines in some markets. And then they have a plant in Mexico, which is where Infiniti recently started building the new QX50. And that plant was also supposed to build a compact car, which I would assume would have been a replacement for the Mercedes C-Class, the current C-Class. And Infiniti was going to do a version of that as well. But so that program has been killed apparently, because Infiniti decided, okay, with sales of the cars going down, even in the premium market, it's not worth it for them to do that car. Mercedes will no doubt, continue with the C-Class, but the joint program is apparently finished. But, that's just another sign of the shift from cars to utilities. So they're still the Mercedes and Nissan are still, or Daimler and Nissan are still working together, just not on that particular program.
Okay. They continue apace.
Yes. And then Toyota's got a new Supra.
The Supra.
Yeah.
In NASCAR. Everybody said it's ugly. It's a NASCAR race car. It's a spec car.
Yeah, I mean, except for the front fascia, they all of them look the same. Whether it's a Toyota Supra, or the current Camry, or the so-called Mustang, or the Camaro, they all look the same. It's NASCAR. Putting that fascia, on the stock NASCAR body, it looks silly. But we will see the real Supra next week at Goodwood in some form or another, the production version. Whether it'll still have some camo wrap on it or not is unclear, but they are going to run it at Goodwood Festival of Speed next week.
All I got is better have a 2JZ in it. It will not, but it better.
It will, yeah. It will apparently be an inline six.
Oh,
but
will it? I didn't. Yeah. I was not aware of that.
Because it's the Supra is the joint development they did with BMW, so it's the new Z4 and the Supra are going to have the same platform, same powertrain.
Z4. I just didn't know that they were going to use. Maybe I
it'll be like the N55 or whatever they're up to now. The BMW inline six. So it should be an inline 6-cylinder engine, just not a Toyota built inline 6-cylinder, which is fine.
I mean, Toyota is making some cars that are very good to drive lately. Even the Camry and if they're partnering with BMW on a coupe, but I don't even care if it's ugly at this point.
Well, the interesting thing is, the reports on this thing are, that while they use the same hardware, they're going to have, the Z4 and the Supra are supposed to have, quite different feel. And the BMW, I guess, is supposed to be a little softer. It's going to be a convertible, whereas the Supra is going to be a coupe. It'd be a little softer, a little more of a cruiser, whereas the Supra is supposed to be more of a hardcore sports car. Which will be interesting.
But that makes sense when you think about it, because I bet that Toyota can better absorb the low volume, lower profit hardtop sports car than BMW can, which with a convertible, something more of a Grand Tourer, it seems like they're saying, okay, like we're going to get our profit out of this thing. and like those are the BMWs that go for big money. Like those are the ones that people generally buy for a very high inflated prices.
Exactly.
I mean, I can see that from a sort of armchair analyst's perspective.
What'll be interesting to see, so we're going to have the Supra replacing the Camry bodywork in NASCAR, but it'll be interesting to see where else they raise the Supra, because right now Lexus runs the RC in GT3 classes, in Europe and here in IMSA, in the GTD class, which is basically GT3 specs. I'll be curious, and they just launched that one last year, so it's in its second. The RC GT3 is in its second year of competition. I'll be curious to see if they switch from that car over to a Supra based car in the next year or two, and to replace that. Yeah,
I mean, more coupes that's always better. So yay!
Oh, absolutely,
yay!
Especially when they're rear wheel drive and have inline 6-cylinder engines.
Yeah, and turbocharged inline 6 too. If it's an N55, right? I mean, even with just the naturally aspirated BMW straight 6, that would be a good time.
I don't know if they even make any more naturally aspirated engines.
I don't think they're all
turbos now.
Yeah, I think they are.
At least in North America, they're all turbos.
That's true.
I'm not sure if they
elsewhere,
still offer
I'm sure they have like a variety of engines.
Yeah.
All right.
And then last item of the week is the Honda Mean Mower. Did you ever watch King of the Hill when it was on?
Yeah. I saw a few episodes. I didn't. Did
you ever see the lawnmower racing episode?
No, but I mean, lawnmower racing is a thing.
It's apparently it is a real thing.
Yeah.
And so I guess a few years back, Honda UK built a lawn tractor. They called it the Mean Mower, and that one had a 1-liter V-twin motorcycle engine in it, and they got a Guinness World Record, did 117 mile an hour two-way average with a lawnmower. And then in 2015, a Norwegian team put together a Viking lawnmower with a GM LS crate engine in it with 414 horsepower, and did 134 miles an hour with that one. So Honda UK is back again with Mean Mower version 2, which now has the 1-liter 4-cylinder from the Fireblade motorcycle, and they're targeting 150 miles an hour with this thing.
You know what? Like, Sure. Can it has to actually be able to mow the lawn at that speed.
It can. So on the original mean mower, what they did, instead of doing a power takeoff like a typical lawn tractor does, to drive the blades, they added a couple of small electric motors under the mower deck to drive the mowers, the blades, and rather than blades, it had steel cables. So they had an electric drive mower deck, and I guess they're using that again this time. But the original mean mower had 109 horsepower. This one has 190 horsepower, and so they're targeting 150 miles an hour with this thing.
Good for them. Good. I mean,
why the hell not?
We need more levity in our lives.
Yes, absolutely.
I think that's fun. It's like the guys who put like a 426 Hemi in a snowblower.
Yeah,
which is apparently a thing.
Well, I was listening to another podcast, Marshall Pruitt's podcast, This Week in Sports Cars, and his co-host Graham Goodwin was talking about in one of the national GT series in Europe, I think it might have been in the UK, somebody's running a Honda S2000 with a GM LS V8 in it, which, in that little car
doesn't sound bad yet. That sounds like a really good combo to me.
Perfect, yeah.
It's probably too much power for that car, if there could be such a thing. But I mean, also super entertaining.
Well, it's a race car. It's not a street car, so
yeah. But still, I mean, like that's I don't know. That's enough power to make an S2000 evil. Because they have their moments, so. Well,
I mean, people have built Miatas with LS engines in them and, small blocks. And they used to do, there have been a bunch of like old Pontiac Solstices that have been converted with LS V8s in them.
The mallet kit. And the LS actually fits in quite well in those cars.
Well, and that's the beautiful thing about the small block is, even though it's a fairly large displacement, it's a remarkably compact package, and it's a relatively lightweight engine.
It is.
A fully dressed aluminum block LS, weighs only about 400 pounds.
Yeah.
That's with alternator and, all the other accoutrements that go on the engine. So it's not just a bare block engine, so, if you can, and it'll fit, because it's a pushrod engine, it's comparatively narrow. I mean, if you compare it to an overhead cam engine like the Ford Coyote V8, that's a pretty wide engine. The small block is really narrow. Considering what it can do, and it's not that tall, so it'll fit into a shocking number of different spaces.
Yeah, I mean, and all pushrod engines are like I remember the first time I saw the pushrod, like the 2.8 liter GM V6, the 60-degree V6. That thing's tiny. Yeah. Tiny. And
it's on the tall side, but yeah, it is really narrow.
Yeah. And it's the same thing, I think that's one of the reasons why the small block became really ubiquitous, but it's also so well loved because it is just really, it's a brilliant piece of packaging.
Yeah, you can stuff it into almost anything.
Yeah, as we've seen.
We'll be keeping tabs on the Mean Mower 2 to see if it actually does manage to hit its 150 mile an hour target. I
mean, that's an angry little V-twin. That's good.
Well, that's a 4-cylinder.
Oh, is it a 4? I thought it was...
The original one was a V-twin. The new one, the version 2, is a 4-cylinder.
Oh, I see.
So it's an inline 4, mounted sideways across the front of the chassis. And can you imagine mowing your lawn with that thing?
Yes. I'd be done in a minute. I only have a quarter acre. It takes me a while walking behind the push mower, but yeah, I'll take it.
All right. So we also had a question on Facebook from a listener from Peter from Bavaria. And he asked, so cars do amaze me. Example, the progress in electrification and automation. But what amazes me most are car people who pay stupendous money for old cars. Example, $50,000 for a totally rotten pre-A Porsche 356, $150K for a good Mercedes 190 SL, $20K for a 40-year-old Datsun pickup, $1.2 million for a Toyota GT, And nothing wrong with that. Why are people willing to pay these irrational sums for the revival of past feelings, which fade away as soon as they drive the first miles on today's roads? A 7-year-old any brand compact car is safer, faster, safer, more spacious, more durable, more economical for like $7,000.
He answered his own question though. Like, have you ever considered a motorcycle? Do you know why people still ride motorcycles? Because they're dangerous, and we have better options. But there is a visceral experience, and yes, I think some of it is nostalgia. But I don't know. What's your take on it?
Well, I think buying anything other than a used, decently cared for used car is a completely irrational decision anyway. Paying $80,000 for, a Ford Expedition, or, $100,000, for any number of cars is totally irrational.
That's true.
It makes no sense.
There's definitely like the stupidity in, say the valuation of air cooled, Porsches. Like that's dumb.
That said, when you're talking about, vintage cars, it's not about, the inherent value of the car or, whether the car is actually any good. And it's not even so much about, the nostalgia. I think anybody that's going to pay, $20,000 for a 40-year-old Datsun pickup is not going to expect it to drive particularly well. In fact, why anyone would pay $20,000 for a 40-year-old Datsun pickup is a complete mystery to me.
So here's the thing though, because we do talk about this sometimes on the Swedish Bricks listserv that's dedicated to a bunch of curmudgeons who still love rear-wheel drive Volvos. And prices of stuff like a 240, say, have been steadily climbing now. And while everybody knows the 740 and 940 are actually better rear-wheel drive cars, the 240 has achieved its sort of niche cult status, especially the 240 wagon. And you can't really buy a good one for, like, I would expect to be paying at least $5,000 and searching kind of high and low to stay in that price range for a good 240 wagon. And you definitely can't put a basket case back together for less than that.
Just finding all the parts, is going to cost you that much,
and bodywork and paint,
something like $1.2 million for a Toyota 2000 GT, or did we talk last week about the Ferrari GTO that's going up for auction?
No, but
they're expecting that one to fetch $45 million.
Yeah, that's dumb. That's like but that's an investment grade car.
Right. Those kinds of cars, or even a rotted out, old 356, those people buy those, they see it as a work of art. It's as much a sculpture as it is a car, especially things like the 2000 GT or a GTO or, any number of other, cars.
$1 million for a 2000 GT doesn't strike me as out of range.
Yeah, only a few hundred of those were ever built in the first place, and it is such a gorgeous car, and the reality is most people that are going to buy those cars and spend that kind of money on them are never actually going to drive them anyway. They're not buying them to drive them. Most of them end up being garage queens.
That's the biggest shame to me, because even that $45 million Ferrari, it has no value unless you actually get to hear that thing run and move under its own power. Like that's where the love of the thing comes from. It's doing what it's meant to do. You wouldn't buy a thoroughbred racehorse and just like put him in your living room.
Right. Yeah. Depends. Depends how much you like the smell of horse shit.
Or you get it stuffed, right? That's essentially what they become. They become automotive taxidermy.
Exactly. And that's why, when it comes to these extraordinarily expensive, classic cars, I appreciate those collectors that buy them and actually drive them, rather than just, get a warehouse and, create their own private little museum. That's why, guys like Jim Glickenhaus, I like, everything he owns, he drives. And he has an extraordinary collection of cars that are not just rare, but they, in most cases are one-offs. He's got his Ferrari P45 that he had Pininfarina build for him on an Enzo chassis. It is the only one of its kind, and he's put like 30,000 miles on the thing since he had it built 10 years ago.
Right, but he's fantastically wealthy, though, and that's what.
Right. Well, yes. I mean, you're going to be fantastically wealthy to buy $1 million Toyota 2000 GT as well.
Right, I suppose, but like when you have that kind of wealth, you can afford to not give a crap about what happens to the fantastically expensive, virtually one of a kind car. I couldn't buy I could buy a 308, but I wouldn't want to drive it because I couldn't afford to maintain it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But I mean, even lesser cars, like my Miata. I have a 28-year-old Miata, a 1990 Miata. I know that it's not nearly as capable as a brand new Miata, or even a 5-year-old Miata for that matter. But it is a lot of fun to, I don't own it and I don't drive it because of its ultimate capabilities. I know that my wife's, 2017 Honda Civic is probably quicker. It's certainly safer, more fuel efficient, a lot more spacious inside, but I have fun with it, and I think, in a lot of cases, especially the lower cost cars, not the crazy expensive ones, but the lower cost ones, it even though they are not as good, from a purely objective standpoint, they actually are a lot of fun to drive. And, I don't think that those feelings actually fade away as quick as you might think. That my friend that I bought the Miata from, he sold the Miata to me because he bought a 1969 Chevy C10 pickup. And a 1969 Chevy pickup truck, is certainly not nowhere near as capable, as a new Silverado or an F-150. But, he enjoys driving that just to drive it around. It's a different kind of experience.
I have to admit this quietly, but I actually sometimes enjoy driving the Crown Victoria just because it's its own kind of thing. you know?
No, that's a totally legitimate feeling.
Yeah. All right. Now I feel
But of course, those cars didn't cost irrational sums of money. So
yeah, but I like the weird stuff. Like I'll send my wife links to like just weird old cars, and most of them are completely impractical, so we're not going to get them. But I'm just like, here's what I would love: a Fiat X19. Not going to happen. Although you can get them cheap, but not going to happen.
If you think your Volvos were tough to work on, try the X19.
I mean, the X19 is just so cool.
It is,
and you could get the Bertoni X19 all the way up to 1988. If you can
find one that hasn't completely decomposed to iron oxide yet.
Well, I think the later ones were better, which it turns out were a Malcolm Bricklin thing. After Fiat left the U.S. market, he imported them as Bertoni X19s until 1988.
Because Bertoni always built them for Fiat.
Right, but they set up the sales channel, and it's funny. Like, I wonder how much of that was a prototype for the Yugo U.S. sales channel, and it's funny that the X19 and the Yugo were both derivatives of the Fiat 128. Like the X19 used the 128 front cradle in the back, just like a Fiero.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just all. Yeah, see, weird cars. I like Fieros too. We passed one the other day.
So basically the answer is there's nothing rational about it. We just do it for the hell of it because we love the cars. Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with loving cars. I mean, that's why we're all here, right? Like, that's right. It's a good time. Spend the money. Also, you can get a lot more fun out of you can get if you say $20,000, that doesn't buy a whole lot of new car, but it sure buys a lot of older fun car, right? Yeah, and I spent a lot less than 20 grand on my Miata. Yeah. So there you go. All right. I think it's time to go for another week. Yeah. As we all listen to the message being left on my answering machine. These work from home Fridays are great. So yeah. All right. Well, thanks for listening. Keep sending us your thoughts, and we'll see everyone again next week. All right. Bye.